He wore a mask shaped like a bird's beak, stuffed with flowers and herbs, to keep the poisoned air from killing him. And yet, it almost certainly didn't work. Between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death killed somewhere between 75 and 200 million people. In some cities, half the population was dead inside a single year. Entire villages were wiped so clean off the map that the grass grew back over the cobblestones before anyone came to look for survivors. And standing in the middle of that catastrophe, walking deliberately into the houses of the dying, was one of the strangest figures in medical history, the plague doctor. This is not a story about heroism in the Hollywood sense. This is a story about a man in a wax coat, armed with a wooden stick and a theory about bad smells, going to work. Let's go back to the beginning of his day. Dawn broke early in a medieval city, and it broke ugly. By the mid-14th century, the plague had already reshaped what a city morning sounded like. There were fewer vendors, fewer church bells ringing the hour because fewer bell ringers were alive to pull the ropes. What there was instead was the low, grinding sound of the death cart, wooden wheels on stone, making its early collection before the heat of the day made everything worse. The plague doctor woke into this world every morning and made a deliberate choice to stay. Many physicians had already fled. This is the part that gets quietly buried in the romantic retelling. The medical establishment of the 14th century largely ran away. Respected doctors, university-trained men who could afford horses and country houses, evacuated to the countryside and waited for the dying to stop. The ones who remained in the city were often the ones who had no choice, or the ones who had signed a contract. Because the plague doctor was, in many cases, not a highly trained physician at all. Towns and cities, desperate for any medical presence, hired plague doctors under formal municipal contracts. These agreements, and some of them survive in city archives across Italy and France, specified the doctor's salary, his duties, and critically, his residency requirement. He was often forbidden from leaving the city for the duration of the outbreak. He was paid in advance, sometimes handsomely. And in return, he belonged to the dying. Some of these men were young, inexperienced, and very recently graduated, or not graduated at all. The city of Pavia in northern Italy at one point hired a plague doctor, who was, according to surviving records, a surgeon with no formal university training in medicine whatsoever. The standards for the job had collapsed alongside everything else. Now, the morning ritual. Before he left the house, the plague doctor dressed, and the dressing was elaborate and deliberate, and, from a modern perspective, almost theatrical. The iconic beaked mask, the one you've seen on every Halloween costume and Venetian carnival poster, was stuffed at the beak with a mixture of aromatic herbs and dried flowers. Lavender, mint, camphor, cloves, myrrh. The theory behind this was not superstition in the crude sense. It was based on the dominant medical belief of the era, miasma theory. The idea that disease was spread not by bacteria. Nobody had the faintest idea bacteria existed, but by bad air, rotting air. The foul stench rising from decaying bodies and stagnant water was believed to be the actual disease, and therefore breathing through a filter of pleasant-smelling herbs was considered genuine medical protection. He was wrong, catastrophically wrong, but he was wrong in a way that almost made sense given what anyone knew in 1348. Over the mask went goggles, round glass lenses to protect the eyes from the same corrupted air. Over his body went a long wax-coated linen robe. Wax, because it was believed to repel the miasma from soaking into the fabric. He wore gloves. He carried a long wooden staff, not a weapon, but a tool for examining patients, lifting bed sheets, pressing on swollen flesh without touching it directly with his hands. He also carried a small bouquet of flowers, not for comfort, as additional odor protection, held under the nose when the beak wasn't enough. Let that image sit for a moment. A man walking through a city of the dying, holding a small bunch of posies to his face. There is a theory, contested by some historians, but compelling, that the children's rhyme "Ring Around the Rosie" refers to the plague. The posies in the song on this reading are the very bouquets the doctors and survivors carried. The ashes are the dead. The "we all fall down" needs no explanation. The theory is not universally accepted, and many folklorists argue the rhyme is far too recent to connect to the Black Death, but the image it conjures is real, whether the etymology is or not. He left the house. The rounds were systematic. In larger cities, the plague doctor covered a specific district. He moved house to house, often flagged by marks on the doors. In some regions, a painted red cross indicated a stricken household. He entered. He assessed. What he looked for was well documented. The buboes, swollen blackened lymph nodes typically appearing in the groin, armpit, or neck, were the defining symptom of bubonic plague. The doctor would probe these with his staff or with gloved hands to assess their stage. He would note the patient's fever, the blackening of the skin in severe cases, the bleeding from the nose and mouth that indicated the disease had progressed into septicemic or pneumonic forms, both of which were essentially a death sentence within days. Then he treated them. And here is where history does not spare us the details. Bloodletting was standard practice. The logic, rooted in ancient Greek humoral theory, held that disease was an imbalance of the body's four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, and that removing blood would restore balance. The plague doctor would open a vein, typically at the elbow or behind the knee, and drain blood into a bowl. This weakened patients who were already dying. It almost certainly accelerated death in many cases. But it was the medical consensus of the age, and the plague doctor performed it faithfully. The buboes were lanced. This one actually had a marginal basis in reality. Draining an infected abscess can relieve pressure and occasionally assist the immune response. But in the context of bubonic plague, with no antibiotics and no sterile instruments, lancing a bubo was as likely to spread infection as to help. The doctor would cut into the swollen node with a small blade and pack the wound with, variously, butter, onion, or dried tree resin. The patient would scream. The doctor would move on. Vinegar was used as a disinfectant, applied to the body, the clothing sometimes used to wash coins so money could change hands without spreading contagion. This one, interestingly, had a thin thread of genuine logic. Vinegar is mildly acidic and does have some antimicrobial properties. Not enough to matter in the face of Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for plague, but it was not entirely without basis. Between patients, the doctor wrote. This is one of the lesser-told aspects of the plague doctor's role. Many of them were required by their municipal contracts to keep records: cause of death, progression of symptoms, address of the deceased. These records fed into the earliest attempts at epidemiological tracking in European history. The city of Ragusa, modern Dubrovnik, used early plague records to develop the world's first formal quarantine laws in 1377, mandating a 30-day isolation period for arriving ships. That period later extended to 40 days. Quarantina, which is where the word quarantine comes from. The plague doctor's paperwork, grim and procedural as it was, laid the foundations for the science of public health. By afternoon, he had likely visited dozens of households. He had touched the dying. He had breathed air thick with a disease he didn't understand, filtered only through a beak of lavender and cloves. The isolation was profound. Plague doctors were avoided even by other survivors. They were feared as vectors of the disease, which, to be fair, they sometimes were, since the protective gear did not actually protect against flea bites, the real transmission mechanism. In some cities, they were required to carry bells or wear distinctive colored cloaks so people on the street could step away. The very symbol of their medical purpose became a warning to clear the road. Some died. Many died. The records of cities like Florence and Siena include the names of plague doctors who did not survive their contracts. And still, every morning, the ones who remained got dressed. The beaked mask stuffed with herbs, the wax coat, the staff, the posies. They walked back out into the city. They were wrong about almost everything. The miasma theory was wrong. The bloodletting made things worse. The herbal beak did not stop a single bacterium. And yet something they built, the contracts, the records, the quarantine policies, survived the plague and became the skeleton of modern public health. The man in the bird mask saved almost no one in his own time, but he may have helped save millions later. If that kind of hidden consequence in history keeps you up at night, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Historian Harry, and we'll keep pulling these threads together.